Blog Talk Radio.
And welcome, everybody. Welcome to Business Insight. My name is Bruce Starr, and I've been hosting TV and radio shows for the last 20 years, and this show, Business Insight, for the last year or so. I am very excited about my guest on this show. He is, or was, I should say, a professional wrestler. He's an author.
Bruce.
He's an actor.
Bruce, hold it. We got a problem.
What?
This is Jim Myers. I'm looking for George. Is George there?
We've got to find George. This is an interview with
Jim Myers, and when I lose George, I really have problems.
Well, Jim, can you please find George so we can have an interview?
Well, I'm not sure you want me to do that. That's why I'm looking for. Do you want to interview? You want to interview George?
I was thinking that I would interview George.
Nice. Hey.
Oh, there he is.
Hey.
Hey.
Animal. Elizabeth. Nice. Get back over there.
George.
Get back over there. I'm sorry about that, Bruce. I tried to prevent that. He just goes wild on me sometimes.
Well,
uncontrollable.
I've watched.
I know you're confused.
I've watched a lot of wrestling matches George was in, and I have yet to see anybody be able to control him in any way. So if you can do that, I'll be very impressed.
It's a struggle, but the problem is, Bruce, you got to understand, and it's been a struggle for a long time. There's two of us using the same body. Jim Myers, that's me, was a football coach and a pretty straight guy. And then this other part of the body, is a wacko. And I was caged with him for most of my life, and trying to escape has been a real problem. But today, I think I've got him caged. So if you'd rather talk to Jim Myers, we can do that. But if you really want me to let George go, he's a tough interview, and I can cut him in wherever you want. But let's leave him lay in the corner. Would that be fine with you?
Well, I've seen Mr. Fuji be able to control him a little bit, and Lou Albano be able to control him a little bit. So I'm going to ask you to do the same thing and see what we can do to keep everything in control so that we can have, a decent show here, Jim. Okay.
I'll work at it. George, sit down, lay down, shut up, and be quiet, please. Be nice. Nice! No, not that kind of nice. Okay, I think we got it.
Oh, God. Well, Jim, your story is got to be one of the most interesting stories that anyone will ever know. And by the way, Jim, we share nearly the same birthday, you being on the 16th of April and I'm on the 12th. And so I can understand how Jim Myers, George the Animal Steele, had a desire to go to places in professional wrestling that were never done before, to find a new way, to find a new character, and you certainly did that.
Well, thank you. It was crazy, This book about Animal really opened up a lot of old wounds. I was a bright, shiny young man until I turned 5 years old and had to go to school. And I just didn't fit in because I had dyslexia, and the teachers didn't have a clue what it was. The kids had no clue. I was bigger than they were, but they laughed at me a lot because I had a hard time communicating. That was all through elementary school, all the way through. I mean, they had reading groups, red birds, blue birds, yellow birds, and brown birds. I was always a brown bird because I guess I read like crap. Anyhow. From there, it went on into high school, and I was still dyslexic. And this is in the 40s and 50s, and high school was in the 50s. and they didn't know what to do with me because they didn't know what dyslexic was. But I was looked at as a big dummy, go sit in the corner. They would take roll and then send me to the gym. So if you go to the gym 4 or 5 hours a day, you should become a pretty good athlete, especially if you have size. And that's what happened to me. And in the process of going through the elementary days, my dad had lost his eye in a fight, so I was told never to fight. So kids would pick on me. I was a big dummy that would run home crying because I wasn't allowed to fight. And one day at a playground, some kids poured water on me, dumped a bucket of water on me, and I went home crying. My mother said, "Okay, Jimmy, you're going to fight today." And she took me back to the playground and said, "Jimmy's here to fight." So the kids all come running. That was exciting because, going to watch me cry again. But what they didn't realize is the leash was off, and the first guy there was Mickey Fulton. And he lasted about 30 seconds, and Billy Hinton was next, and they started dwindling away because I was doing a number on them physically. And from that time on, the first success I had in my life was fighting. So now, in high school, they sent me to the gym, and I'm physical, so let's go. And then from there, I got married coming out of high school 58 years ago. My wife is still with me. That's a miracle in itself. And then from there, it was going on to Michigan State, totally unprepared. I had this learning problem. Nobody knew what it was. When I got there at Michigan State, the enrollment officer recognized that I had some basic intelligence, and it was set up for me to take some of my classes orally, the finals and the test. And what they have found out since is everybody, when God takes something away from you, He gives you something in replacement. And for dyslexic people, most dyslexic people have fantastic memories. And not going to put myself in this class, but Einstein was very dyslexic, really out-of-the-box dyslexic. So it's not, there's some positive things that roll around in that empty mind sometimes. And so I got through Michigan State. God knows how. I was in a lot of trouble going through. I was on a football scholarship. Never played it down because of my grade problems and the physical, I was getting in fights and a bad knee and on and on and on. It wasn't God's plan, I guess, for me to play football at Michigan State, and I loved it there. And I still love Michigan State. My big saying is go green. And I'm excited about the football season starting. And then from there, though, it was teaching. $4,300 a year, Bruce. $4,300 with 2 children, a third one on the way in 1961. Now, and I went back to teach where I'd gone to school, so the teachers were all a little bit leery of me. I had quite a reputation coming out of high school. And the only reason I went back there is my enrollment officer who helped me get through Michigan State. I was planning on going to some small town up in upper state Michigan and starting a football program and growing up with that. He said, no, you've got to go back to your roots because your reputation will follow you. So you got to go back to where to Madison and eliminate the bad rumors because you've been a bad boy there, more or less. So I did go back, and I was planning on staying at Michigan State or at Madison for 2 years. 25 years later, I retired. So I spent 25 years there. I was a football coach, a wrestling coach, and I did early on coach some track. And I was blessed with great kids. So we had some success in our programs because of the kids, not necessarily me. And then in the second year I was teaching, it was in junior high, 1963, 63. I was looking for a part-time job because of that $4,300 a year income. And a friend of mine who was a huge wrestling fan talked me into calling Bert Ruby, the local promoter. And I called him about 1 o'clock in the morning because I was out looking for a job as a bouncer in a bar, and I didn't get hired. My friend and I were drinking a few beers and found out that doesn't help you get hired as a bouncer. So I called Bert Ruby. He invited me over the next day and knocked on his door. He took one look at me and said, "Beautiful." I stepped back because I know what I look like. And beauty is not part of it. And he invited me into his office after I met his mother-in-law, his wife, and his 2 children, and started talking to me about the wrestling business. And he was a little bit, he knew a little bit about my athletics. He asked me to take my jacket and shirt off, and when he saw the hair on my body, he went bananas. Whoa, now I'm really nervous. And he starts explaining to me that the thickness of my body and the hairy body would be good for wrestling. So I relaxed a little bit again, and I told him I didn't want to wrestle and use my name, Jim Myers, because I taught and coached right there in the area. So we decided that maybe a mask would be a good idea. I talked to the administrators at the high school. They highly recommended a mask, and I became the wrestling student, because I was learning the business. And I wrestled in Detroit and Michigan and a little bit in Ohio, Wisconsin, and occasionally Wisconsin, Indiana, and got over pretty good at this. Now I got to tell you, when I first come home after talking to Bert Ruby, I told my wife I was going to have to go to Windsor, Ontario, through the tunnel from Detroit to work on learning how to be a professional wrestler. And she turned to me, she said, "What? We don't have any money. You can't afford the 25 cents to go back and forth the tubes to go to Windsor to learn how to wrestle."
Wow.
So she had no confidence in it. And it was, 25 cents meant a lot to us back then. And 50 cents and doing it twice a day, then twice a week, that's $1. Wow, with no income. That's tough. Anyhow, we did it. And eventually I got to wrestle with a mask on. I wrestled with it on for about till 1968. And really got over big as a wrestler. Now, the problem that I had with wrestling early on, the first day I went to the gym, they beat me up. They tried to beat me up. And fighting was my game. Remember, that's my success. So there was 4 or 5 wrestlers there, and as they tried to beat me up, I gave them receipts, and all of a sudden they said, "Here, we want to show you something." And they started showing me how to work a wrestling match. And real quick, but they told me not to tell Bert Ruby they were showing me this. And it was a show, but it was a real show. So, a lot of people don't understand that part of it. I'll cover that later on. But it was a show, and because it wasn't as real as I thought it was, it really got me angry, because I thought they were challenging my integrity as an athlete. I had a lot of pride in my athletic ability. That's all I had going for me. So my first year wearing a mask was kind of a struggle. I was not a happy camper, but I did need the money big time, and I was making some nights $45, $50 a night. I mean, come on. I was only making $4,300 teaching. $25, $50, that's a lot of money back then. And I was excited about that. My wife kind of liked me bringing home the money once we paid for the wrestling gear, which was $135 or something like that. And we had no income at that time. So it was, we were struggling. And the deal was, Bruce, I'd get up at 7 o'clock, go teach until 3:30, then coach football or wrestling. Not early on, it wasn't wrestling, it was track. And get done with practice about 5:30, 6 o'clock, jump in my car and drive somewhere in Michigan or Ohio, 200 miles, 150 miles to wrestle at 8 o'clock. Do the math, I'm usually late. I'd wrestle and I get there and come back and have a few beers with the boys, and I wouldn't get home till 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I'd get up at 7 and do it all over again. And that was every day, except days that we had football games or track meets, and later on wrestling matches. So I was running low on fuel, no energy at all, and doing it every day except Sunday. We never had any shows on Sunday. And I did that from 62 to 67, actually 66, 67, actually 66. Bruno Sammartino, the WWF champion at that time, came to Detroit with an entourage from New York and wrestled the Bulldog Brower. They spotted this crazy with a mask on, and they invited me to come to Pittsburgh. So I went to Pittsburgh, first time I ever flew an airplane to a wrestling match. I flew into Pittsburgh thinking I was a big-timer, had my mask and my cap and gown, ready to go as a student. Got there, and the promoters told me, no. Ace Freeman. He said, "We don't want a masked man, we want you." And so I said, well, I'm not going to use my real name, Jim Myers. And Johnny DeFazio, a guy from Pittsburgh, now in politics, said, well, this is a Steele city. Let's call him Jim Steele. I said, I don't like Jim so much. Somebody said George. So George Steele is only about 46 years old. Do the math. It's somewhere this close anyhow. I am still dyslexic. So anyhow, I had my first match on TV without a mask on, and I felt naked because I'd always had a mask on, and now my face is out there. And one of the advantages, and it really helped me later on in my career, is when you're wearing a mask and performing, you've got to do all your selling and acting and everything with a lot of motion because you have no facial expression. So that's how I got over. And I was a big-time mask man in Detroit because of the body language and all this. When I took the mask off, I didn't know if I'd have any facial expression. Well, you've seen George the Animal Steele wrestle. I certainly did. And it just come together like nature had done it. And wrestled Bruno Sammartino, I think, 2 or 3 times in the Civic Center in Pittsburgh. And the business had been struggling there, and we sold it out a couple of the times.
Wow.
So all of a sudden people are very interested in this George Steele character. The next year I get a phone call, and it's from the WWF. They want me to come into the Northeast. We're talking New York, Philadelphia, Boston, da-da-da. And it's funny, I meet with Mr. McMahon. Now, this is Vince, the owner of the company now, his father, in Washington, D.C., and he had heard about, what we'd done in Pittsburgh, so he brought me in. And he takes a look at me and says, take your shirt off. Take your jacket off. Take your shirt off. Here I go again, because I was dressed like a school teacher. I had a sports jacket on with, leather around the elbows because they were wore out and so on. And most of the wrestlers dressed pretty slick and sparkling, and I just wasn't that way. So when he looked at the body, he got excited too. And the next thing I know, I'm booked in. I wrestled about 4 or 5 TV shows, and I'm booked in Madison Square Gardens with Bruno Sammartino. And the new gardens had just opened, and they hadn't been doing great business, and we didn't do great business, to be honest with you. It was about half full, but there was a spark in there. You could feel the spark, and the next time we wrestled in there, the next show, it picked up quite a bit. But the funny thing was, Boston was the town, with the old Boston Gardens is where they were really doing good business. And they had a guy come in by the name of Virgil, the Kentucky Butcher, and Bull Ramus, an Indian. And then I was the third guy in, and Bull Ramus wrestled the first one in there, and Vince in the Boston Gardens. And Vince had booked him one match, and they sold out the Gardens, which was pretty huge. And then the next guy, and there was the Virgil, the Kentucky Butcher, and when he wrestled Bruno in the Boston Gardens, the house dropped to about half. And the return match dropped even a little bit more than that. And then the third match was not very well received either. And I was next, and I was booked in for 2 matches, and the first one we sold out, the second we sold out, and all of a sudden everybody thinks that I'm the coming thing, but really Bull Ramus sold it out too. I just got a shot to have 2 of them, 2 matches. And the funny thing is, my first match in there against Bruno in Boston Gardens was the main event. And in those days, they played the national anthem just before the main event. So here I come out like an animal, rah, rah, with that look, and all of a sudden they strike up the national anthem, and Bruno turns his back on me and puts his hand on his chest and is saluting the flag. I'm in the corner, and Bruno's between me and the flag. So this is totally unacceptable at the time. At these times, we're talking in the 60s. I'm a wild animal. What do? I attack Bruno. Bam, bam, with his back turned. We almost started a riot off the top. We had a fantastic match. When I went in the dressing room after the match, Arnold Skolin, a retired Marine who was running the show, Bruno Sammartino, and all the wrestlers were screaming at me, "What are you doing?" during the national anthem. And I said, well, he turned his back on me. I'm there to fight, and it just didn't make sense for me to stand there and salute. I just did what I thought was natural. They said, well, you almost had a riot. You're going to have a riot in here if you ever do that again. You never do. I said, wait a minute. Why do you play the national anthem before the main event? Why don't you play it at the opening before the whole event, and then I wouldn't attack Bruno when his back's turned to me. They got this funny look on their face, and they said, oh, that's a good idea. So from then on, they played the national anthem at the opening of every show in the WWF, WWE to this day. If they still play it, I don't even know if they do or not. But they used to always play it before the event. But that got me started in Boston. And then, the sellouts after that, my gosh. And then,
but George, what was it like?
Let me tell you this, Bruce. We're doing great business at this time, and they're all excited. and it becomes August, and I tell them I'm leaving. I'm going back to teach. They couldn't believe it. And that's what I did. But I got a phone call in the spring the following year. They wanted me back. Guess why? We were doing great business. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I just had to get that in.
Well, I thank you for...
I can't just keep talking because, they never let me talk in the WWF.
Jim, I was watching...
I'll call George over.
I was watching your interviews on Piper's Corner and Piper's Pit in the last, couple of hours before the show, and I just absolutely loved the character and what you did. But I've got to ask you, Jim, tell me about the emotions, the feelings, about what it's like to go up an alleyway up to a ring with 20,000 people watching you.
Honestly, I don't know. I've never done
it. Well, George, would you come up, please, and speak to us?
Hey, yeah.
George, you performed in front of 20,000 people at Madison Square Garden, Boston Garden. Can you tell me what it was like to perform in front of 20,000 people all looking at you?
Beat Bruno.
Okay, George. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Get back over in the corner and sit down, George. He doesn't want to talk to you right now. You'll be back. Don't worry about it. Yes, what do you want?
Maybe you can explain to me what George felt like when he looked up into the balcony seats and there were 20,000 people looking at you to perform. What does that feel like?
You know what? In all honesty, I never really looked at it that way. I was in the dressing room. Jim Myers is always in the dressing room. And early on, guys used to walk to the ring and then get in character. And my wife went to a match with me, and I did the same thing. And she said, well, if you're going to do all that motion, why do you just walk to the ring and get in, wait till they announce you, then you become into character? So I was one of the first guys that went into character coming out of the ring. And at that time, and I'm not kidding you, Bruce, at that time, I was sitting there talking to somebody just normal like I am now. When it said, you're on, and the door opened, and George went out the door, he left me sitting behind. And that's the honest-to-God truth. I don't know how to explain it. It might have been because of the learning disabilities. It might be because I have a multi-personality. I don't know. He would grab chairs and I've watched the videos, but it was like I was never with him.
Wow.
But by the same token, when I went back to coach and teach, George was never with Jim, except one time. I'll explain that one later on. Almost got me fired as a coach. But the two personalities never really crossed each other. They were definitely two people using one body. And I think that's what makes the book Animal so interesting. Wrestling is really what the book is about, but it's also about overcoming many obstacles, many obstacles, the learning disability, a financial situation in wrestling being the answer to that. Later on, coming down with Crohn's disease, which there's no cure for, and I'm totally cured. So when you go through all this stuff, and my whole life, I'm 76 years old now, and I still don't look that bad. And people, I was at a baseball game in last Saturday in Lincoln, Nebraska, and people are coming up, well, you haven't changed at all. Well, I have. And they asked me, do you still wrestle? I said, yes, to get out of bed. I'm 76 years old, and the body has been beat up. But I do a lot of personal appearances now at baseball games. I love that, and I'll tell you why. It's family entertainment. People can afford the tickets, minor league baseball, and they have a beer night so the dads can get a beer for $1, and the kids can go and get back into one of the great sports of the history of our country, baseball, and they just really totally, it's a great night in or out for the fans and the entertainment. Plus, the players, most of them are not prima donnas yet, so they'll sign autographs and blend in with the kids. It's just a great event. That's why I like doing minor league baseball. It's family-oriented. And there's a little plug, I guess, for minor league baseball, but I think it's huge. And then, go ahead.
I mean, I would certainly love to meet you sometime, and I know that's going to happen. But I want to ask you, Jim, tell me about Vince Jr. and how you saw what he did with wrestling, which of course brought it from a very quiet. I used to watch the Washington D.C. matches in black and white on television, which his dad announced, and then he hands over the reins to Vince Jr. and it became a totally different form of entertainment. Give me your take on that.
Well, yeah, I was right in the middle of all that. In fact, my career is based on that, to be honest with you. And the book covers that a little bit. I was in for his dad. Vince was about 12 or 13 years old when I first came in. And at about 17 or 18, I don't know his age at the time, he came in and started, was used as he started setting up the ring first, and then he started doing some ring announcing and doing the interviews, and he was really getting into it. You could see that. And, in fact, he was kind of like I was. He was a split personality. He could do 4 or 5 different interviews better than the guys that were doing them in their voice. I mean, he would actually change voices, so I think he's got a split personality also. And Don Morocco and I used to laugh when he would do that. Look at him. Now he's this, now he's that, now he's Kamala. It was crazy. Anyhow, and he's really out of the box. And at first, a lot of the people thought that, and they still do, a lot of the old wrestling people think that he's really screwed up wrestling. But he really has screwed it up. He's taken it from a $1 million business to a multi-billion-dollar business. Give me a break. I mean, how much better can you do? It has changed. But, wrestling had to change, and you know why? Because of the social media. That was critical in our business, and I could see that. I wrestled up until 89, and I quit because I came down with Crohn's. But he brought me back as an agent, and I could see the big changes there. In fact, it was passing me right on by. In our era, we had a thing called kayfabe, and we were all independent contractors, and if a new wrestler came in, or if a wrestler started putting our business out on the street so people could knew what was going on, he was handled in the ring and didn't last long. It was not the promoters that handled kayfabe, it was the wrestlers. Once Vince Jr. started passing out contracts, they were no longer personal. They were no longer personal contractors. They were now under a contract, so they didn't protect the business the same way that we had. And the business was taking a drastic change. And I had a hard time with that. I really did. And some of the wrestlers would blatantly walk into the dressing room or into the arena with the guy they're wrestling. In fact, we had the British Bulldogs, and they had Matilda, who was a dog, and the dog would attack their opponents. Well, the British Bulldogs didn't like Matilda, so the heels often would bring the dog with them right through the crowd. And I'm going, wait a minute, it's a dog. This is kind of funny, but it's kayfabe, and the dog's going to attack them, and they're bringing them in, petting them. It doesn't, it just didn't ride with me. So, but the business was changing, and what Vince has done, and nobody has really figured it out yet, but I have. It's not about the wrestlers anymore. They have some great talented wrestlers. I don't know if they're not as talented as we were, I don't think, but they're much better athletes than we were. They're super athletes. Right. And they do things that I never would have thought of doing. The difference is we were much tougher than they were, and I think that was obvious also. With that said, Vince developed a brand. What sells tickets today is like the circus. The WWE is coming to town. The circus is coming to town. They go in there with like 9 trucks of equipment. I'm talking about 18-wheelers to set up the ring and the pyro and everything that goes along with their production. It's the greatest production in all of television, period. That's the WWE, the production. Now you look at the NFL. They've copied a lot of the things that the WWE does as far as production is concerned. You'll see interviews in the back room, in the locker room. You never saw that before. You see the same thing in the NBA. And you're now seeing it in the baseball. You see pyro. You see all kinds of things that Vince started because it's all entertainment. All pro sports is a form of entertainment. Ours takes it to another level. I mean, football, they really play the game hard. Baseball, they do the deal. And basketball is the same thing. But and Vince right now is better than all of them when it comes to production. No question about it in my mind.
He really is. But I have a question about him that you may have maybe never been asked this before, because I used to watch him where he would he would all of a sudden lift weights, and he'd look pretty buff himself, and he'd get in that ring, and he was an antagonist, an antagonizer, and it seems like he was at times ready to really get into the fray with the actual wrestlers.
Well, he did.
Was there ever a
He did.
I remember he did. I remember. But when he was in the ring with the mic and antagonizing everyone, was there ever a time where he really lost control inside the ring?
No. He was a tremendous businessman. He, what happened? Bret Hart was wrestling Shawn Michaels, and Bret Hart was the champion, and Vince had asked Bret Hart to do Shawn the favor and give him the belt, and Shawn said, "Well, I will not." Bret Hart said, "I will not do that in Canada." So they double-crossed Bret Hart, and the referee did a real fast 1, 2, 3 count, and they put the belt on Shawn Michaels, and Bret Hart was livid, and he was on his way. He was going to the WCW anyhow for a multi-million-dollar contract, and that put all the heat on Vince McMahon, because everybody knew that, and the referee said, "Well, Vince paid me to do the fast count," so they double-crossed the champion, the WWF champion, and give the belt to Shawn Michaels. What that did was that made Vince McMahon a horrible bad guy. He cheated. I mean, come on. So what's happening is, business-wise, we had lost Hulk Hogan to the WCW for more money. We had lost Scott Hall, or the Razor Ramon, for more money. We had lost a bunch of different people, and at this point, Bret Hart for more money. What Vince did was ingenious. He made himself, for that double cross, the hottest item in all of wrestling. So if somebody was walking off to go to the WCW, Vince would invite and put himself into a situation where he was actually going to go to the ring and fight. And in Steve Austin's case, a lot of people always hate their boss anyhow, so he was going to beat up the boss. It made him the hottest thing going. It made Vince McMahon the hottest heel in business. And to this day, every time something happens, well, it doesn't happen anymore because he's totally taken over the business. But back then, if somebody was leaving, all Vince would do is interject himself into a storyline where he was going to fight somebody, and they forgot about who left. They forgot about the WCW. In fact, the WCW died because of that. I mean,
wow.
He became the hottest item in wrestling. I'm often asked in some of my interviews, who would you, if you came back, and if you were back at 35 years old and on top of the world, who would you challenge in the WWE? My answer is always Vince McMahon. That's where the money's at. That's where the money's at.
Hey, I just today.
Does that answer your question,
Jim?
Vince?
Oh, yes, perfectly, yes. Just today, I watched the match that George had with Kamala. When I didn't see George able to get up. Can you ask George anything about that match, or do you know anything about that match?
I can tell you about that match because I was instrumental. Jim Myers was instrumental in that one. They're talking. The match is important because Kamala is going to wrestle Hulk Hogan in the next show in the Madison Square Gardens. So we had to really get Kamala over big time. And that means they're going to have to beat George somehow. And George was never, ever carried out of Madison Square Gardens. He's fought his way out with police all around him and crowds, boom. But no one had ever carried him out on a gurney.
Exactly.
So Vince, they were talking the match, and they said, well, Kamala's going to come off the top rope, 400 pounds, and crush you, and they're going to do this here and this here. After they count you out, just kind of roll out of the ring and bring yourself back together and go wild and leave the arena. I said, no, that doesn't make sense. He said, if the 400 guy is going to come down and crush me, in fact, I think he did it twice.
Yes,
Why
he did.
in the world would I get on my feet? I said, they carry me out on the gurney. Put me right out, flatten me right out. And they started rolling me over to the gurney from the ring. we almost had a riot. You could hear them. When you get that real heat, they get silent before they explode. And they rolled me onto the gurney, and as they're rolling me out, it exploded. I mean, I thought they were going to erupt into a riot. But it really got Kamala overstrong. It hurt me in this way. They made me take a brain scan, and they found out I didn't have one. The athletic commissioner. Anytime you're knocked out in a boxing or anything, you have to have a brain scan. So they would give me a brain scan, and I had a tough time passing that. Just kidding. But anyhow, that's how that all come about. Now, the funny story, there's more to this story, a lot more to this story. I had done a commercial. I did the first, I think, national commercial ever done by a professional wrestler for Minolta with Tony Randall way back when. This was in the 80s, probably 84, somewhere around there. And in the process, they housed me. I used to stay at the Howard Johnson's on 8th Avenue, kind of a tough place. They housed me in, what was the name of it? It's now the one of the Marriotts right across the street from, oh, golly, Pete. Now
the Marquee? The Marquee?
No,
Marriott Marquee on.
You know, the salad. What's the salad with the apples and salad? What do you call that? Great salad.
Oh, well, that's okay. That's all right.
Oh, I know. We got to get it now. Anyhow, we're at this hotel, the Marriott, but it used to be called something else. It was a real high-end place, real high-end, and the company that was bringing me in for the commercial had put me into a room. When I got there, they told me all the rooms were taken, but there was a suite open, and somebody had it for the next day, so I'd have to get out in the morning. Peter Demetrius was the room manager. He was not there that night, and I didn't know this. He was a huge wrestling fan. So I did the commercial. The next morning, I get a phone call. They're going to have to change rooms, and it was Peter Demetrius on the phone, and he came up with 4 bellhops because he thought George Steele would probably ate all the pillows, threw up the room. It was going to be a riot getting him out of there. They came to really drag me out or run or whatever. If I'd have known that, I'd have scared him to death. I opened the door. Jim Myers opened the door, not George. Yes, can I help you? They went, huh? And then they moved me out and everything. And Peter later on told me, how scared he was and why he had the bellhops there. And I said, boy, if I'd have known that, we'd have had fun. Anyhow, from that time on, it cost $480 to stay at this hotel, and we were staying at the Howard Johnson's for $75. You do the math. But because Peter liked me, he set it up for me to stay at the. I almost had it. Something house. Anyhow, for $45, and I could park right out in front on the Avenue of the Americas. And the cops would bother me because the bellhops looked out for my car. I mean, that's amazing in New York. You just don't do that. And so he told me I can get all the wrestlers' rates because he was a wrestling fan. I said, no. A lot of wrestlers that come here and tear your whole hotel up. Pardon me. If I give you a guy's name, that means he'll be safe and no problem. So I gave him about 4 or 5 names that could stay at the hotel for $45. The guys loved it that stayed there. Greg Valentine, Hillbilly Jim, those kind of guys. It was never going to cause any trouble. So anyhow, I'm in Hawaii. Now I'm in Hawaii, and this big guy who used to be a great wrestler he's out on the beach renting surfboards, and I'm talking to him, and right now I'm going dead on his name too, but it'll come back to me. I'm talking to him. I said, well, why don't you come with us? And he said, well, I can't wrestle. I said, no, but you're a great interview, and we could use you as an interview. I'll tie you up with Vince McMahon because at this time, I got a lot of power with Vince Jr. So anyhow, he calls Vince, and Vince invites him in, and he becomes a manager, and he's managing Kamala at this time. But I've also set it up for him to stay at the Hollerin' House. That's the name of the hotel. I knew it would come. at the Holler.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. So now he's checked in there, and the night comes where I'm wrestling Kamala, and he comes off the top, and they put me on the gurney, and they pull me out. Peter Demetrius goes back to the Hollerin' house and tells the people to get that, I can't think his name either right now, but get his clothes, get him out of here, pack up everything, put it in the suitcase, and when he comes, we're kicking him out of the hotel because of what he did to George. So this guy got kicked out of the hotel that night because I stayed on the gurney. That's a long time to get to the real story, and I can't even come up with a name right now. But
that's great. But
it's just how it happened, and so he's kicked out. I'm carried out, and life goes on. But all that happened in one night. You can't put all that in a book. That's a lot of stuff.
Wow.
And I know in your airtime it's very valuable, but those stories they just go on and on and on. And
That's why I asked you on the show, George. I want you. That's why, Jim, I asked you on the show, and George, because that's the kind of stuff I want to hear about and learn about. But I have another little bit of a question for you, because when I watch your videos, you were a pretty smart wrestler. You didn't really tie it up with these guys. That you weren't the kind of guy that would get the heck beat out of you. How did you manage? Or I don't see you as getting hurt that often. How did you manage to not get hurt like some of these other guys did? Because even though it is entertainment, we all know these guys get hurt, get broken legs, and all this kind of stuff. As a matter of fact, I saw you break a guy's arm on a video just this morning.
One of the things that was a blessing for me for a lot of years. Think about this. I would wrestle 2.5 months. And then I'd go back and teach and coach.
Right.
And my body to rekindle and rebuild. Then I'd come back in the spring and do a little bit of TV. Then I'd have a 2.5 month run in New York, Boston, Philadelphia with the champions only. Then I'd go back and teach. So most of the time I was teaching and coaching. I wasn't out getting beat up and hurt like the rest of the guys. I recovered. The reverse part of that, it takes wrestling to get used to the beating that you take or give or whatever. It takes a little bit of time to get used to that. And I used to come in cold, just from teaching and coaching and being a main event a week later. And that was hard, too. I mean, it was hard conditioning. And there's no way to really prepare yourself for that. I just did it on greed. I needed the money. Come on.
Wow. Well, what I'd like to do is I'd like to bring up some wrestlers' names to either you or George. Okay. And you or George, the Animal Steele, can react and just tell me whatever comes to your mind. I know we already brought up Bruno Sammartino, and I think I've heard the Animal's response to Bruno. Does Jim have a response about things about Bruno that we don't really know?
Well, no, I think everything about Bruno is pretty much out there. He is probably the greatest champion of all time.
Yes.
To be a great champion, and Bruno's not going to like this, but this is how I see it, probably one of the biggest egos of all time. He really thought after he retired, he thought he was bigger than all of wrestling. That's why it took him 20-some years to be accepted, to accept going into the professional wrestling, not the professional wrestling, the WWE Hall of Fame, which he did just last year. He's knocked the wrestling business for years and years and years and years. And I think, this is just me talking, it was because the business was so successful without him.
Yes.
But what you got to understand is, and Bruno I don't think understood it either, it wasn't the same business. We used to go, when Bruno was champion in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, we would wrestle a show in Madison Square Gardens every 3 weeks, except the week that the month that the circus came in. I think that's where young Vince got the idea of the brand WWE being like the circus. Anyhow, so to go in every 3 weeks and do great business in the gardens, now as big as the business is and the production that it is, they can only go into the Madison Square Gardens 2 or 3 times a year and do big business because it's a totally different business. They're selling the brand name. They're not selling a Bruno Sammartino versus George Steele type thing. They're selling the WWE is having a pay-per-view, WrestleMania, and that's what sells. It's not really about who's in the main event. I mean, the biggest show going right now in WrestleMania is The Undertaker wrestles one match a year, and it's in WrestleMania. Come on.
Right.
It's about the brand.
Exactly. George, what did you think of Bruno?
Hey, tough. Beat Bruno. Hey, DQ. Bye-bye.
And what about Sergeant Slaughter?
By a lot.
Yes, I noticed a lot. What about Sergeant Slaughter, Jim, George?
What a great character.
Yes.
Oh, George, you want George?
It doesn't matter.
Oh, Sarge. First action figure. G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
He was the first wrestler that sold action figures as G.I. Joe and opened that whole door for the rest of us later on.
Wow.
Vince was going to fire him because he brought a lawyer in to represent him, so he fired him for a couple of years over the action figure deal. But he came back and still a big time with the company and as an agent and so on. And they Vince loves him over there. But they had their run-ins.
Tell me about Haystacks Calhoun.
Big, big, no slam, too big. Bye-bye. Haystack was a very original guy. To me, he's what wrestling should be all about. Haystacks, if you knocked him down, he had to get a hold of ropes to get back up. He was a big old fat 600 pounds. I spent some time. In fact, I got a story in the book about sharing an apartment with Haystack. But later on, with Vince McMahon Jr., they had guys 450 pounds getting on the top rope via Vader or Bam Bam Bigelow and doing moonsaults.
Yes.
To me, that kind of kills the business a little bit. Why leave that for the little guys? Let the big old heavy guys wrestle like big old heavy guys. Like Andre the Giant always wrestled like a giant. He never wrestled like a midget.
Right.
Come on. So I
did you ever wrestle? Did George ever wrestle Haystacks?
Hey, garlic. Hey, bad garlic. What happened with George and Andre is that George and Andre got along really well in the locker room, but they were in separate locker rooms in Albany, New York, at the old Armory. And Andre had told everybody, "Watch this tonight. I'm wrestling with George. I'm gonna have some fun." And Andre ate about 5 garlics, washed them down with wine, and then would push George in the match over to the corner and put his big hands around his face and go, with all that slobber stuff like a gas mask. And George got a hold of his thumb and pulled it and got away from him. And he pushed him in the other corner and put the gas mask up there again. George got a hold of his thumb, rolled out of the ring, gave him the Italian salute, and left the ring. He did that every time he wrestled with Andre because he didn't know what to do with him.
Well, that was a package. I don't know if I'd want to get. I met him once, and his hand was 3 times bigger than mine. I don't know if I'd ever want to get. Oh my God! And one of the great stories, one of the great wrestling stories of all time, is you and Randy Macho Man Savage.
Yeah. George, tell us about Randy. Elizabeth, nice. Nice. Randy, jealous. Bad boy. Elizabeth, wink at George. Elizabeth, like George. Get over there, George. Lay down. That storyline that was a great storyline. I knew Randy Savage's father, Angelo Poffo, when Randy was about 12 or 13 years old, and then went into baseball. His desire was to be a Major League Baseball player, and he was a great one. He got to AAA baseball, but never went any farther. He was in the St. Louis Cardinals program, and he came into wrestling. He was a very astute professional. Very jealous over Elizabeth. The storylines were really made good because he was so jealous, and it was a real deal with him. And George would just play off of that big time. I remember one time that Randy was getting ready to leave the ring, and he was all mad. And George looked over and said, "Randy, I got daughter older than Elizabeth. Relax." And Randy just was opening the door to go to the ring. He said, "But I had great run with some of these young broads around here." Randy just lit up. But he was on his way to the ring. He couldn't come back. I mean, it just fired him up. And those kind of things happened all the time. George was always pulling ribs on Randy when it come to Elizabeth. And Junkyard Dog was part of that too. One time they wanted George to take a bump, and Elizabeth was going to be standing there to grab her by the ankle. And we were talking about doing that in the dressing room, and Randy said, "Oh, that's just you and George again. Are you and Vince, George, just trying to rib me? Why do you have to grab her ankle?" And Junkyard Dog started laughing. And Randy says, "What's so funny to you?" He says, "Well, you better find out if George is laying on his belly, holding onto her ankle, if he's laying on his back, holding onto her ankle, looking up her dress." Randy went nuts. "Well, are you going to be laying on your belly?" Come on. Those guys, I got a whole chapter on a lot of stories in there and my perception of Randy. And basically, the run that he had with George the Animal Steele was the real beginning of his popularity and becoming a WWF champion later on and becoming a huge superstar after our run. And as far as George was concerned, that was kind of the end of his career. He was 50-some years old, and that was the twilight run that actually made it so that Jim Myers and Pat Myers had a great lifestyle here in Cocoa Beach. So the retirement was very good. Thank you, George. Hey! So that's how that worked out.
A couple more I want to ask you about. Bob Backlund.
Oh, Bobby. A lot of people, Bobby never got the respect that he should have had as the WWF champion. He was one of the greatest champions of all time. And the good thing is he knew how to wrestle. The funny thing was he didn't look like a champion. He looked like Howdy Doody. And the people called him Howdy Doody. And he had a vocabulary, he practiced big words all the time. He wanted to be a CEO of a company. He thought big words could do that. He is a CEO of his own company now. He owns an oil truck company where he delivers oil during the wintertime. And Bobby's a great guy, just a great guy, a real professional. I had a lot of fun with Bobby. He didn't like George at all. He did not like wrestling with George because Bobby was a wrestler and George was a brawler. And
right.
The matches fit really well. And they wrestled often for about 6 years. They wrestled every summer almost. And George made a lot of money for Pat and I wrestling Bobby. So I have nothing but great respect for Bobby. What do you think of Bobby, George? Break, arm, bad, Bobby.
Ooh.
In other words, George always tried to break his arm with his hammerlock.
One more guy that I'm curious about. We could talk about Hulk Hogan, but Hulk is really, everybody knows about him. Lou Albano. Captain
Lou. What a great guy he was. Captain Lou took George, and did you ever see when he took him to Dr. Sigmund Ziff? And they put a thing on his head and electrocuted George, trying to make him smart.
No.
Well, you can find that on YouTube out there. It's just one of the funniest things they ever did with George. And in the process, they're giving him electric, and Vince has told George to learn this real long poem, and George is also dyslexic like I am, so that wasn't going to happen. And so Vince gave George this page-and-a-half poem to recite when they electrocuted him and made him smart. When the time came, all George said was, "How now, Brown cow?" And Vince looked at him like this. The place went nuts, and people still come up to me and say, "How now, Brown cow?" I said, "No, that's George. Leave me alone." But Lou just had a lot of fun with George. He was also with Cyndi Lauper and wrestling into the rock and roll theme, and Lou was huge in our business, huge. Now, was he the greatest manager I ever had? TV and talking, yes. Outside the ring, so many times you'd be in the middle of a match with a storyline, and he'd cause a distraction outside. You'd have to start all over again. So he made you work really hard because of the distractions. But a great guy.
Was his daughter Cyndi Lauper?
Oh, no, not at all. But he did he was in the video, Girls Just Want to Have Fun, and he played the role of her father in the video.
Oh, okay. That's how that got started. Okay.
Exactly.
So you wrote a great book, George. I just absolutely love the book, The Animal, George the Animal Steele. That you had some help from Jim Evans and forwarded by Cowboy Bill Watts. You've known all the greats. People can see you wrestle to this day and forever by going to YouTube. I have one more question I want to ask you, and I know we're getting close to the end of the show. In your opinion, why do so many of the wrestlers die at such a young age, or is there any kind of rhyme or reason?
Oh, absolutely. And the media jump all over this, and they're wrong. They're always talking about steroids. It's not steroids. The guys have always punished their body to give the fans a great show. Always. It goes back to my era. Now, they do higher, wilder, crazier things now. And what they do is they take a lot of pain pills because they're hurting. And then after a show, you're all excited. You can't just go in and go to bed, so they go out, party a little bit, have a few drinks. The pain pills and the booze is not a good idea at all. That's what's killing the guy.
Wow.
And it's they're so far out there now, Bruce, that a lot of them take pain pills, or some of them take pain pills before they go to the ring, so they're numb and they don't hurt. So that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about.
Wow.
And it's not wrestling. It's bad decisions by the wrestlers. Why do things that are going to hurt you? I never did any. I never got on the top rope. Once I got on the bottom rope and fell off, but then it was tough enough.
I saw that from you, really. So knowing what you know about life and knowing what you know about wrestling, what would you say to a younger person who thinks I might want to be a professional wrestler?
Join the NFL.
That'd be a lot easier than wrestling. Yeah.
There's more teams. There's 40 guys on a team. There's only one WWF, and there's only 5 or 6 top stars. And join it. But I got to tell you about the book before we go. I just got to tell you.
I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you next. Go ahead.
Well, let me tell you about the book, because I think you and everybody alive should write a book. And I'm going to tell you why. I've got, when you read my book from A to Z, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. How did this happen? How did he get to Michigan State? How did he graduate? How did he coach? How did he teach? How did he get into wrestling? He never watched wrestling. He wasn't wrestling. How did all this happen? When you start looking at your life through the rear view mirror when you're writing a book, you start to see things a little bit differently. And I can see how the whole life, as screwed up it was, and the directions I went, was being led by God. And he was leading to the Lord Jesus Christ. And in the long run, when I finally came down with Crohn's, there's no cure for Crohn's. They didn't know the cause of it. They told me that. And you eventually die. I no longer have any symptoms of Crohn's. I don't have any markers from Crohn's. I'm totally cured from Crohn's. But I'm sure that God walked me all the way through my life and then walked me through 10 years of the worst hell I've ever had in my life, or anyone could have, with 10 years of blood count below 7 with Crohn's disease. And then to walk me through it and have me survive. And out of that, because I was a real hard-headed, led me to go church shopping. And Pat and I went to the largest church in the area to eliminate it, Merritt Island Baptist Church, to eliminate it, because I was brought up as a kid as a Baptist and I didn't like it. We went there, and the first time we were there, Pat and I are both teachers. They had we have a K through 12 at the First Baptist Church of Merritt Island, high school and junior high and elementary. And it was full of kids. What we didn't know was that they had a gospel singer from Australia that was going to give her testimony that morning and a concert that night. And the following Tuesday, Bruce, was 9/11. So we went back to the church, crying like the rest of the country. And we're in the Space Coast, so it's full of military in their uniforms, bending their knees and crying and so on. That was the hook for me. And the Pat said, no, we got to wait. We accepted the Lord later on in 2002, and my life has changed drastically. And this whole crazy puzzle of my life, looking back at it through the book and writing the book, I now understand that God was getting me where he wanted me to be. And now I speak very strongly. I'm very bold about my feelings about the Lord Jesus Christ. I do not want to shove it down anybody's throat. I might mention it, and they say, well, what do you think about the Tigers this year? We talk about the Tigers. Because before I accepted the Lord, people would come up to me and say, where are you at with the Lord Jesus Christ? And George would respond, what's it to you? So I don't push at all. But that's why it's important. And that's why I think the book is important. And the book doesn't shove that down either.
No. And that's my next question was going to be, how have you managed to live and thrive at your age? And you just answered that question. And so what I want you to tell the folks real quickly is how they can buy your book. Well,
you can get it cheaper at Amazon.com. Barnes & Noble, most of them are carrying it. I've done a lot of book signings at Barnes & Noble, and I like doing that simply because I get to talk. I put George in the corner, and they let Jim talk. George never goes, hey, they don't want to listen to him. Anyhow, it's just been a fun thing. If you're going to write a book, don't plan on writing it to make money. That's not what it's about at all. It's about getting a story out that you think might help somebody. And I think if my book helps one person with a learning disability or with Crohn's disease or with the Lord or with their finances or anything, then the whole project's worth time. And that's the way I look at it.
Well, I have been totally blessed by this hour that you've spent with me, Jim, and I would like to give you or George the last statement, the parting statement, if you'd like. The mic is all yours, and George.
Well, Jim's not real good on the mic. I'm going to put George on. He's better at closings. Thank you, Bruce. Buy Jim's book, or I'll come alive. Bye-bye.
God bless you both. Thank you so much for being on the show. This has really been a blessing, and I hope that this is just the beginning of a bit of a friendship between us as well, Jim. So thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.